Hello, this is a video to summarize all the tips, tricks, experiences, treatments and cures that I discovered for sinus cancer during a terrifying and sustained battle with the illness that lasted over 2 decades. Just before we begin, I would like to make it clear that I am not a medical doctor. The following advice is based upon my own personal experiences coping with the severe symptoms of sinus cancer for over 20 years in order to share this hard-won knowledge with others who may be suffering from similar conditions. This video may therefore be of interest to patients, doctors and general public alike who wish to hear a patient's perspective. And without wishing to dwell for too long just on my experiences, this timeline of my life shows the 25-year ordeal with sinus cancer that I suffered starting in 1995, depicted by the red line here, lasting virtually up until the present day, and I am pleased to report a very significant reduction in my symptoms and suffering over the past few years. This is following the application of all these treatments and cures I discovered along the way. And I hasten to add that this really amounts to nothing short of a marathon that I was forced to run, quite simply if only for the fact that I was misdiagnosed by 3 different ENT specialists in 1995 when it all started. This is quite an amazing or astonishing misdiagnosis by 3 specialists when I presented with all the full-blown symptoms of sinus cancer at Bournemouth Hospital in 1995, which to this day still warrants a closer look as far as finding an explanation. And 3 botched attempts to diagnose by 3 different ENT specialists meant I was abandoned because, and this is my own explanation, the only answers I could come to, really, I mean, given such a drastic failure of the system. Rarity of sinus cancer in younger generation. This is bearing in mind that sinus cancer usually only affects the over 65s and then only very rarely. In other words, to say, yes, it affects the older generation, and to find therefore somebody of 28 years old like I was in 1995 suffering with all the full-blown symptoms of sinus cancer is practically unheard of. Not impossible, but just extremely rare. Now, we have also lost vital knowledge. That is the other option, the other explanation as to how I was misdiagnosed on 3 different occasions. Lost vital knowledge. This is in light of a discovery made recently that, of course, sinus cancer is a very ancient illness. And we should have millions of years of experience, not just diagnosing but also treating it. Now, this is following a discovery that anyone can make using Google. All we have to do is put in this very straightforward question: when did humans start walking upright? And that, of course, should tell us or give us a very clear indication of how long we've been gathering knowledge on the subject of sinus cancer. The answer here is very conservative, I hasten to add. Recent discoveries, archaeological evidence, including bones, etc., have put this figure closer to 7 to 9 million years now. So one thing we know 100% certain at this stage is that we have 7 to 9 million years of knowledge in diagnosing and treating sinus cancer. 100% certain, no doubt whatsoever. So the next question is, well, what on earth has happened to this knowledge? Because how on earth has somebody in 1995, this is after, we've gathered knowledge for 7 to 9 million years, been misdiagnosed on 3 different occasions with one of the most notorious and terrifying illnesses known to mankind. I mean, this is not, yes, it's a rare illness, but it's also a very, very famous illness, that it's part of mythology and stories dating back, to the various earliest beginnings of time. So, yes, we know that we have 7 to 9 million years of experience, hard-won experience on this subject of treating and diagnosing sinus cancer. So this brings me to the next part. Neglected by the medical system, I was put into an ancient category of treatment, left to fend for myself for the next 20 years, providing me with a stark reminder that for 99% or 99.99% of our time on the planet, we have treated sinus cancer without modern medical intervention and without the help of modern medical equipment, such as X-rays, MRIs, CAT scans, and electricity and all this, and hospitals standing on every street corner like we have today. Quite simply, hospitals are a very, very new thing. And yes, for the vast majority of time on the planet, we never had such a thing. What we did have was knowledgeable doctors, but those doctors worked in their own home environment. They didn't work in a hospital, and they didn't have access to all this equipment that we see today. So that raises the question, well, what has happened to 6 million years or 7 to 9 million years of knowledge on the treatment of sinus cancer and its diagnosis? Which is a question that I have tackled in a number of other videos, and this is obviously shines light on the fact that there is a very serious scam afoot. I won't go into all this now, but please feel free to freeze the screen and have a look at what this is, and there is more videos I've made on this subject, and I shall move on from that. But basically, yes, we have lost huge amounts of knowledge on this subject, and I would just like to go into the symptoms very briefly, what they are, what this is the symptoms I was suffering from, the type of suffering this is that I was forced to endure. This is 1995, a tumour that would manifested in my sinus cavity, left sinus cavity, exacting pressure on my head like so, and all the associated symptoms, which eventually resulted in a mild distortion to my face. This is a elongation of the left, mild elongation to the left side of my face, creating this mild facial distortion 17 years after the first development of the cancer in 1995. And I believe I'm extremely lucky not to have a more serious case of this facial distortion than you can see on the screen at the moment. So the yes, the symptoms that I had was all the classical symptoms of sinus cancer, which you can find on any sinus cancer web page, from any charity that purports to look for cures for this illness. This is all the associated symptoms, which all seem to start, and all seem to revolve around this blockage to one side of the nose that doesn't go away. I'd just like to focus on that very briefly, because this does keep resurfacing, and it is the central sort of key feature to these symptoms that doctors would have used thousands of years ago, I believe, to diagnose this disease. Quite simply, the blockage does not go away after about 12 weeks. I have endeavoured, I believe, on this just to shine a light on this subject here. This is reasons for nasal obstructions, flu, colds. You'll get a temporary blockage for a couple of days on one side, switches to the next side, swinging back and flow like a pendulum. Sinusitis follows roughly the same kind of pattern. Polyps slightly different. This is like a swelling in your nose that can swell up and cause a permanent blockage to one side of the head, but that notoriously doesn't last, for more than a few weeks. And of course, if it's running into the 8-12 week timeline, then that's a sure sign it's turning cancerous. And if you're sitting on the 12-week mark and it's been a full-on blockage, I mean intense blockage, you can virtually guarantee 99.999% that's cancer. So doctors will have used this as a rule, thousands of years ago, even millions of years ago, to diagnose sinus cancer. Foreign bodies and particles very easily spotted and noted. So if a pea-sized piece of metal or wood flew up my nose, I would be able to tell my doctor about it. So that is self-explanatory. Now, yes, the point I was just trying to make was that by default I fell into this ancient class, an ancient category of sinus cancer patient that was forced to deal with all the symptoms on my own. Clearly suggesting that yes, for 99.9% of our time on the planet we have treated sinus cancer without the help of modern medical intervention. Clearly meaning that we have 6 to 9 million years of knowledge in treating this disease, quite simply because people were forced to treat their own symptoms and run the marathon that I was forced to run for many thousands of years, or millions of years, before hospitals were invented. So in other words, this marathon that I started in 1995 has been run by thousands of other people over the last 6 to 9 million years, and we have very carefully collected their knowledge and thrown it in the bin, because there's no money, there's no profit in it, and there seems to be, worse than that, it seems to compromise people's jobs. And this all harks back to this ridiculous cancer scam that's going on that I mentioned a short while ago. So yes, it's very rare that somebody should finish this marathon like I have, with all the knowledge acquired to reverse the symptoms of this god-awful illness, and have the opportunity to put the information out there on the internet, YouTube, for people in these early stages suffering horribly, horrifically with these early symptoms, to latch hold of and at least stand a small chance of finding on the internet or YouTube as they're trawling through all this information, desperate to find a solution, and give them a chance of survival, give them a chance of reversing their symptoms, take them out of this horrible loop that the medical system puts sinus cancer patients in, simply because they're running this horrible scam and just suppressing cures and keeping patients in the dark, which is nothing more than just, of course, the original kind of terrorism, isn't it? The most clearly defined form of terrorism, I think, on the planet. Literally, to use a terminal illness just to terrify the living daylights out of people. So yes, that then raises the question as to what's happened. I was going to say, you're releasing these treatments and cures, and of course what exactly these treatments were. And it's worth pointing out that one of the first improvements that I made to my lifestyle choices was this alkaline diet. This is following the development of the first symptoms of sinus cancer that literally forced me to migrate toward an alkaline diet, because eating junk food made me feel so much worse, and eating good food may help me to feel better. So without even realizing I had cancer at the time in 1995, of course I was misdiagnosed, so I had no clue what on earth was the matter with me, and I also had no clue about the alkaline diet. So without even knowing about either of those two things, I was being forced to migrate toward an alkaline diet by a disease that I also didn't know about. So that was very strange, but the upshot of that has been that I've learnt about the alkaline diet later on, down the line, when I realised it wasn't until about 17 years later I realised I had cancer, until things got so ridiculous and so obvious, what was going on, that that the whole thing, the truth just revealed itself anyway. That was while I was trawling through a Cancer Research UK website and found all my symptoms listed in a long line. Now, this food chart, yes, I mean, depicts, how sugar and bulking agents, colorings, artificial sweeteners, numbers, all that sort of thing, falls into the more acidic category, and accompanied by things like bread, rice, wheat, of course, and well, I mean, meat also is quite a famous culprit, but in moderation, I still think a small amount of meat won't do a cancer patient too much harm, as long as you don't go too overboard on it. But the point being here that if you migrate toward an alkaline diet, replace these less nutritional foods with more alkaline, nutritional based foods, then yes, you're going to stand a higher chance of survival, as simple as that. So I'll leave you to research that in your own time. The other thing that was brought to my attention was spirulina, a natural health supplement, which can be used in juices and smoothies. I've made a little slide just to help people get started with that and put you in the picture. This is 1 teaspoon in a bottle of water and shake once per day. That certainly serves me very well, and has helped to stabilize my energy levels and even my mood, I've found, while all chaos has been going on around me. So yeah, the other option, of course, is pop a teaspoon in a smoothie, and here's some ingredients just to help you get started. And I recommend the second option, actually, quite simply because it tastes better and there's more nutritional benefit in it. Let's have a quick look here. So that's that one. We've got herbs, spices and black seed. Yes, definitely worth doing a lot of your own research into the anti-cancer properties of herbs and spices, one of which, or one of the most famous of which rather, is black seed. If you can build a small arsenal and use these in moderation, you can get tremendously powerful effects, I believe, not just anti-cancer but virtually any other illness. Sodium bicarbonate, yes, that's a very well-known alkalizing agent available from any supermarket. Can be used to alkalize the body. Again, recommend that you research that on your own. Which is again part and parcel of the alkaline diet. It's not something I personally use very much because I don't believe with sinus cancer, it's going to be that helpful. I certainly will be. I mean, could be. And personally, I put it in my shoes, oddly enough, because I think that it can be absorbed through the pores in the feet, and helps to alkalize me that way. While I use this stuff for internal and this stuff for external, oddly enough. You may wish to do other things with it. Colloidal silver is another one that doesn't get much publicity, but still nevertheless has some extraordinary properties, and antibacterial, antiviral, antibiotic, which works in better harmony with the body than over-the-counter prescription antibiotics, and for external and internal use. Yes, easy to research, easy to make in your home or in your kitchen. And the interesting part here is that this is antiviral as well as antibacterial, and of course prescription over-the-counter antibiotics are just antibacterial. There's no such thing as an antibiotic from the GP that has antiviral properties like colloidal silver does. And of course, in today's environment, with this COVID-19 lurking about, which clearly appears to have other viruses inserted into it, such as HIV and rabies, you will also find that colloidal silver works very effectively against HIV and rabies and COVID-19. So for that reason, and of course all the associated infections that a cancer patient can get, can also be easily treated using colloidal silver. And I do believe it may even have anti-cancer properties as well, which would be extraordinary. So yeah, can't say enough good things about that at the moment. Oil pulling. Now, yeah, this is another one because I lost the majority of my teeth, over half of my teeth, Yes, the point I was just trying to make here is that I lost over half of my teeth. This is while battling the exasperated tooth decay caused by sinus cancer for over 15 years. And the point being here is that, of course, I found a solution to this problem in the form of oil pulling. This is 16 years later. This is just a picture I've got from Google Images that anyone can bring up and search for themselves. And clearly highlights all the benefits of oil pulling and how supermarket oils can be used to remove bacteria, microbes, fungus from the teeth simply by swishing it around the mouth for a couple of minutes and spitting it into the bin. So yes, the disappointment here was huge, of course, because I was going mad literally with this exasperated dental decay problem right at the early stages of my development of sinus cancer in 1995-96, literally being driven up the wall by this sensation of maggots in my teeth, which, as I say, resulted in the loss of over half of my teeth over the next sort of 15, 16 so years, and only to find that that around 2015 there was an answer to there was a very simple solution to the problem. If somebody had told me about oil pulling right at the beginning here, I could have used it to save every single one of my teeth. I mean, absolutely no doubt about that at the moment. So yes, can't say enough good things about oil pulling, which, as I say, seems to work on the principle that plants are virtually sterile by design. For some reason, plants do not have even low levels of bacteria in them, or if they do, it's extremely low, which means by definition, any oil extracted from a plant is also virtually sterile by design, and has been, of course, for millions of years. So that clearly suggests that humans could have used this technique to keep the dentist away and dental problems away 50,000 years ago, 20,000 years ago. It's very feasible. So yes, while it's not more common today, I'll leave you to answer that question. And as I say, extremely disappointing to only find out 16 years down the line there's a very effective way to reverse tooth decay and can help sinus cancer patients enormously, I found. I mean, literally, I have managed it. If you looked at it, just very brief before I move on, you can see how I have been oil pulling here, and you can see how it's cleared stains on my teeth. This was a bigger stain, it's reduced. Had a terrible stain on this one. This was all black, gone back white. So you can literally see that the few teeth I have, are now perfect, which is just very sad. I'm trying not to use the word pathetic, but it's certainly extremely sad, that such a simple technique can be so incredibly effective. And then raises the question, well, why don't we know about it? Well, I mean, of course, the first reason is it keeps dentists in employment, doesn't it? Well, gives them, I mean, they already have employment. Do they need more work? I don't think so. I think it's just greed, to be perfectly honest with you. Dentists will always have employment, of course. So that then brings us to lifestyle changes, again, which fall into the similar category as to the alkaline diet. Actually, I mean, you'll find any sinus cancer patient experiencing the severe symptoms, initial symptoms of sinus cancer, will be forced to migrate toward a healthier choice of lifestyle decisions, quite simply because, as I say, the severity of the symptoms forces the patient unwittingly toward healthier choices. And this certainly was true in my case. Lifestyle changes: stay away from dust and pollutants, open the window permanently. Yes, that's day and night. Choose a lino floor, wooden floor. As simple as that. I do believe I've tried, just very briefly, to express this in a picture here that I put together. Dust, chemical pollutants, smoke and allergy. No carpet, choose lino or a wooden floor. No stale air, open the window day and night. No lying down in a smoky, dusty atmosphere. That seems to only aggravate and trigger symptoms in the most terrible fashion. I found lost so many days like this I can't count. So yes, opening the window at night is almost more important than during the day. if you're lying down. No dust or chemical pollutants or smoke is the goal of this task, and one, as I say, you'll be forced to achieve, even if you're not consciously aware of doing it. And that then brings us to the last limiting factor here. Nothing has much effect until smoking is tackled. This is the breaking the smoking habit and removing it with a view to unleashing and releasing all the medical benefits listed above, which of course are compromised and very much restricted while this ball and chain is still attached to the patient. So yeah, that really I would like to be the main focus of this video. And just to get us started, I've got it's just a little word of advice just before we begin, which is, if you can give up smoking, just naturally, literally just put it down, and whether that be just in increments or just all at once, well done. And the cheapest option for that matter. In many respects this ticks all the boxes. If you can get that one sorted at the first step on the ladder, then take my hat off to you. I didn't succeed, unfortunately, so yes, I'm very lucky to be here, just literally from that point alone. So mixing weed hash with tobacco achieves limited results defined by the flawed logic. And interestingly enough, I mean, this is a method that quite a lot of people do choose to try and give up tobacco. If they decide one day that the habitual tobacco smoking is bad for them, and they might have a cumulative effect on their or damaging effect on their body, then there's many people, I mean myself included, decide to start mixing the tobacco with weed and hash, and with certain excuses being relayed to themselves, such as well, I'll smoke less of it, etc., etc. But yes, it achieves limited results defined by the flawed logic, there's which we'll get into in a moment. Bongs, pipes, chillum all use negative pressure collapsed and can cause a collapsed lung. This is obviously includes cigarettes, tobacco pipe smoking, virtually all the accepted forms of smoking that we see going on around us, all clearly use negative pressure. This is sucking, in a vacuum inside the lungs in order to drag and suck the smoke out of whatever object it is, the cigarette, the spliff, or the bong, or the pipe, into the lungs. And the problem here, when negative pressure is there we go here, it's created in the lungs, which obviously is all part of the sucking process, then the combination of black, just dirty thick smoke in the lungs and negative pressure causes a collapsed lung. This is a medical fact, which should be more well known, and is unfortunately one of the reasons why a smoking habit is not going to take you anywhere, or only certainly drag you to a premature death. Now add to that the fact that you've got toxins, hydrocarbons, carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, paper, nicotine, all kinds of other stuff burning away, contaminants. This is to whatever you're trying to take. So obviously, I mean, if you're trying to treat cancerous. Hello there, welcome to episode 2. I would like to focus on the smoking habit in this video, the breaking and removal of the habit with a view to releasing all the medical benefits of the treatments that I outlined in the previous video. So obviously the first option is the best option in this instance, to give it up naturally. If you can, well done. Now that comes with a word of warning, quite literally, because for sinus cancer patients, speaking personally, by the time that we realise we have to give up the smoking habit, of course, the symptoms are so severe that they are driving us to smoke more. So there is a vicious circle happening here, whereby by trying to untie a knot, that we accidentally tighten it, and quite literally patients understandably, reach for another cigarette or another spliff, when their symptoms of sinus cancer start to bite hard, and so at that point that their doctor tells them that you have to give up, of course, that's the time when they suddenly realise they're most dependent on it. So, and of course, the chances of giving up are much, much less at that point. And the other issue actually I would like to address is that not all sinus cancer patients are smokers. The vast majority are, but some don't. And what I'm wondering is, quite possibly, I mean, some catch it, they'll be living in or working in smoky, unhealthy, dusty environments, whether it be sawdust or coal or whatever, triggers this sinus cancer flare up, and they're not even smokers. So then I would strongly advise that you switch to things like cannabis or and all these other things, taking it internally and all the treatments that I outlined earlier. But as far as smoking goes, cannabis is one of the most famous medicinal plants on the planet, surely well known to doctors of old who knew how to use it wisely to achieve the best results. I mean, surely that, as we already have looked into, has a 7 million year to 9 million year history of use and experimental experiences. So that much we know for certain, and that then clearly suggests that smoking, yes, is the abuse and reckless, irresponsible use of medicinal plants like cannabis, is an ancient problem, clearly indicating an ancient solution, that most likely could have been offered by an ancient doctor, of course, who was very knowledgeable on the subject of medicinal plants such as cannabis. Now, that then raises the question, well, of course, what happened to these doctors? And with at least 7 million years of knowledge today, all we see is reckless, silly, irresponsible ways of using cannabis, wrap paper around it, set fire to it, shove it in a bong, a dirty bong, of course, mix tobacco with it. Every dumb way of abusing it is accepted and encouraged, which is nothing short of astonishing. After 7 million years of experimental experience in using this plant, and a very clear indication that somebody along the line has been murdered, of course. This is very clearly the backdrop to this sad story, that serial murdering intelligent doctors who had the correct knowledge and experience to reverse the most terrifying diseases known to mankind, quite simply posed a problem by the jobs and profit that they compromised. And quite simply, yes, this was the beginning of Antichrist worship. This was the building of the satanic empire upon the earth, quite literally, by spreading the epidemic of smoking and irresponsible ways of using medicinal plants on a worldwide basis, of course. I mean, what is closer to anti-life worship than slowly sucking the life out of somebody using a spliff, a bong, or a cigarette? I mean, sadly, there isn't much closer. And we have the first indication, as I say, this is setting up the Antichrist church of worship on the earth, and all part and parcel of evil satanic anti-life doctrines. Now, this is what could be, and well, what most people regard as the biggest crime of the millennia, not just the century. It's crime of the of our epoch and our era, the biggest crime that we're ever likely to hear about. And as I say, this slow sucking of the life and the promotion of just irresponsible, reckless ways of using medicinal plants only appears to translate into this awful anti-human, anti-life Chinese torture, quite literally just that involves just slowly draining the life out of everything that moves. Now, to gain a better understanding of how all this came to pass and how such a tragic turn of events happened, we have to look more closely, I think, at the history of cannabis. which oddly enough is not as easy to research as you might think. And what I discovered, this is just looking on the internet, such videos as this one here, Cannabosum, the hidden story of cannabis in the Old Testament. Yes, there's a lot of information in there, over 2 hours worth, and what they point to is new evidence of the reference of cannabis in the Bible that was not spotted before. This is in literally with the words cannabosum, cannabos being the early pronunciation of cannabis, meaning canna meaning cane, bosum meaning smelly blossom, so cane, smelly cane. Yeah, that was the origin of that. And as I say, these people very curiously unearthed a story of hash-eating royals who, in times long before the Bible was written, ran empires and civilizations quite literally from their palaces, where they, the royals at least, kings and queens, sat there eating hashish in order to treat their ailments and illnesses. And this, I believe, this clearly went on for many, many, many thousands of years. This, as I say, royal elite who resided in their palaces and ate hash to deal with any cancers that they contracted, or any other illness for that matter they developed. And all the proof of it was found by this gentleman, Rick Simpson, around the turn of this millennium, around 2003, I think, and it wasn't until about 10 years later he started publishing his results, around 2012, that it went viral on the internet, that he had reversed his skin cancer using this cannabis oil on his face. He literally had skin cancer on his face, which he, used this cannabis oil to reverse and get rid of, and then other people started following suit in droves. Now, the proof, basically, yes, is what this man discovered, is of course, what all these royals were using many, many thousands of years ago, to suggest that they highly likely, ruled great empires for many thousands of years, very successfully, just eating cannabis. While incidentally, it was strictly banned for their citizens and their subjects, who may even have received the death sentence quite simply for daring to use this plant that was used by the royals. Now, from the point of view of stability of the monarchy, that was very good. That was fantastic. Citizens and subjects don't like to hear about their king faltering and dying prematurely, and cannabis helped to keep a stable royal appearance and a veil of stability. So cannabis doctors serve the elite. This is that they obviously clearly had doctors who would have prescribed them, cannabis, told them how to use it for whatever ailment they had. But these doctors and the plant itself are not available to the citizens or the subjects, of course. And this is what gave way to the laws that we see today. And likely also, created all the smoking-related illnesses among subjects as a means of punishing them. In other words, getting rid of sensible knowledge, in other words, to suggest that getting rid of sensible knowledge in this macabre fashion was all part and parcel of controlling the population and promoting, via the promotion of reckless, irresponsible ways of using this medicinal plant. Now, this controlling of the population, of course, could also serve as a means to punishing them, because once they developed, a nasty sinus cancer and started to suffer, with all these problems, then the royals or governing parties had a perfect opportunity to humiliate them and tell them that, this cannabis plant you're using that you thought was medicine turns out not to be medicine, and you're just an idiot. So there we go. It was a perfect opportunity for the royals and politicians just to turn around and laugh at them, and of course, exploit them to the extreme, that they whatever extreme they wish to, um, uh, serving the perfect purpose of keeping the population just constantly under the grip of the anti-life or anti-Christ government, slowly draining the life out of them, keeping them sick, keeping them weak, keeping them on their knees, easy to govern, which is, obviously one of the most ancient ways of controlling and ruling over large populations known to mankind. And that, I suggest, was the real root of the scamming, the cancer scam, disease, lies, horror, mutilations, crime, addiction, mental health issues that we see running rife today, as well as the promotion of reckless, irresponsible ways of using cannabis with 7 million years of experimental experience. Clearly to suggest that this whole damn thing is artificially created, right from the word go, 2,000 years ago with this awful problem, which, as I say, behaves as a stark warning that we have to be a sucker to believe this scam, a sucker to believe, that a fag, a joint, a bong will have a proper medical effect. And of course, there's no shortage of people that I've changed this round slightly now. Medical fact: negative pressure plus smoke in the lungs, collapsed lung. And this absolutely, insane ways of using the world's most medicinal plant. Yes, we have to be a sucker to believe it. A sucker to believe that wrapping Bible paper around the world's most medicinal plant will suddenly, and setting fire to it, will suddenly cure the world's most terrifying illnesses and make us immortal somehow. Believe it or not, people do believe it under the effects of smoking this junk. Now, point being here, of course, is that what you can create here is a partially effective medicine. This is partially effective, and as we all know, partially effective medicines are the most effective at creating addiction. So yes, partially effective medicine gives way to rampant addiction, which gives way to a downward spiral of ill health in the general population, who are by now so blind and gullible that they can't see a way out of it. And they've been doing it for so long, of course, they don't know anything else. Sucking away for dear life, believing in a total far-fetched fantasy. So speaking from experience, I was a sucker who believed, too many lies. I didn't, I wasn't aware of this at the time, but I do now. And looking back, it's all very romantic, isn't it? It's all very sweet, very romantic, but none of it actually true. A grain of truth to it, but certainly by no means all true. A little bit like the Bible, oddly enough, and does signify, this possibility of enlightenment. Now, let's have a quick look at this. This is some of the ancient royals here who may have, used cannabis in days gone by, who would have been treated by their royal doctors, of course, who were only allowed to serve them and nobody else. And this, as I say, then provides a very clear, or clearer route, clearer insight into the origins of our own laws today, and current problems that we are struggling with. Now, what is of interest here is that I learned about a way, as I say, to break this awful problem, to break this negative pressure. As I was talking about here, the negative pressure plus smoke in the lungs equals collapsed lung, all this sucking business, and the hydrocarbons, carbon monoxide and dirt that, all comes with it, is something that I realised could be broken just with a simple trick. And I was put onto this trick by two sources of information. One was from travellers, oddly enough. A bunch of travellers who were mentioned the subject of using tongs in order to literally keep themselves healthy, ward off, they didn't have access or the money to a hospital, I don't think, so yeah, they would have used them, in much, simply just to ward off cancer and things like that they were simply, not able to deal with. Now, yes, tongs, heard it, the other source of information I heard about tongs from was the internet. Now, this is from a video called cannabosum, which highlights some extraordinary new discoveries regarding the use of cannabis in the Bible and references to cannabis in the Bible that were not previously recognized. This is in the form of a word, cannabosum, that has recently been linked to cannabis, quite simply because canna means cane, bosom means smelly, translated from the ancient text. And cane smelly is highly likely to be cannabis, and pronounced cannabis, or they think it was pronounced something like cannabis, which gave way then to the word cannabis that we hear today. And interestingly, I believe, yes, they also unearthed information, relating to hash eating royals in times gone by. So yes, and of course, one thing they did also mention is the use of tongs, because interestingly, tongs, of course, and just the burning of hash, this is hashish in tongs, just to inhale, as we should see in a moment, basically breaks this vacuum in the lungs. So in other words, if we just inhale the smoke literally from if it's trapped inside some kind of vessel, then in other words, if we can somehow trap this smoke here in a vessel, obviously minus the paper and all the other crap that he's put in there, but yes, that means then you don't need negative pressure. You've broken the negative pressure issue. And if you can purify what's in the vessel, then you've also managed to get rid of a lot of contaminants, as we shall see in a moment. Now, without further ado, I would like to just play this video just to give you a picture of what these people discovered and the use of tongs to achieve better results from using cannabis, and highly likely, to have been used to cure patients who did, from the general population in times gone by, who were struggling very badly. They're probably misusing cannabis, misusing tobacco, misusing probably other things as well, in a terrible state. And they used basically tongs, yes, were the go-to piece of equipment for helping these individuals and dragging them out of a ditch, quite literally. They were stuck in a ditch with their wheels spinning, and they would use it to get them out of a ditch back on the road.
On me the fat of your sacrifices, but you have burdened me with your sins and worried me with your offenses.
Just before we go on, you have burdened me with your sins and worried me with your offences. There is even this is reading straight from the Bible, there's a clear indication there that there is a massive crime afoot. The burden me with your sins and offences, this whole setting up of the scam, promoting addiction, promoting this anti-life worship. There's a clear reference to that, as I say, just as the guy just mentioned there. And
fortunately for the prophet Isaiah, the altar of incense did not always run quite so dry.
And the post of the door moved at the voice of him that cried, and the house was filled with smoke. Then said I, Woe is me, for I am undone, because I am a man of unclean lips, and I dwell in the midst of a people.
Yeah, so just play that bit again because it deserves a second hearing.
And the post of the door moved at the voice of him that cried, and the house was filled with smoke. Then said I, Woe is me, for I am undone, because I am a man of unclean lips, and I dwell in the midst of a people of unclean lips.
Woe is me, for I am undone, for I dwell in the midst of a people of unclean lips, for I am a man of unclean lips. I mean, that really reiterates everything that I've been saying, really, for the whole duration of this video. The whole thing is a scam, the whole thing is a lie. It's just dirty words from dirty lips, reckless, irresponsible ways of using medicinal plants, just to make us sick, in the midst of just a god-awful scam. and clearly suggesting that yes, smoking in biblical times was as big a problem as it is today, if not even bigger. Let's just
For mine eyes have seen the King, the Lord of hosts. Then flew one of the seraphims unto me, having a live coal in his hand, which he had taken with tongs from off the altar. And he laid it upon my mouth, and said, Lo, this hath touched thy lips, and thine iniquity is taken away, and thy sin is purged.
Lo, that has touched thine lips, and thine iniquity is taken away, and thine sin is purged. Very clearly indicating that this patient was stuck in a ditch, that woe betide him, he was not going to get out until somebody helped him. And yes, they used the tongs to get him out of the ditch, provide a bit of a ramp, and get him back on the road. Just as simple as that. Which then raises the question: well, how would the royals react to this? I'll just let this guy finish his explanation. Actually, it's quite interesting.
Those of us familiar with hashish know that it burns in a similar way to both incense and coal.
Explaining why they use the word coal in the Bible and not hashish. I mean, clearly hashish would have not been a very popular word to use anyway. So yeah, coal sufficed, needless to say. So yes, this then raises the question. Well, in these here we go. Given that, yeah, some poor chap had been plucked from the throng, outside the palace, struggling with a smoking-related illness. I mean, very clearly these people, don't look like kings and queens, and have been plucked out by some kind doctor who clearly sees the opportunity, to heal this poor man. Can't heal everyone, but he can at least pick out one. And this is what's happening now. Of course, what kind of reaction would this have incurred from the governing royals? Well, they wouldn't have been very happy about it, because this is their doctor. Remember, these doctors would have, as far as they're concerned, only been serving them, and would not have been allowed to, serve peasants and slaves. So that very possibly upset the royals, made them furious and angry. And the other problem here is that, yes, healthy onlookers, healthy members of the general population who saw this happening, in times gone by, in royal kings and queens in their abodes, if people from the audience here were watching somebody being healed, then of course they would have become quite jealous and very curious and confused, primarily, yes, jealous at the fact that maybe they hadn't been involved, or they didn't have the knowledge, and they haven't been cured. So what we have here now is some angry royals, all very angry about this event, you know what I mean, that this guy has now been cured, and all of a sudden, he can't be as easily governed. So that then explains, why, or shines a brighter light, on the reasons and motivation, inspiration for getting rid of this guy, in this famous story that we read about in the Bible. So this then raises the question. Well, clearly the tongs. The interesting thing about the tongs is that it breaks all the negativity associated with reckless ways of using cannabis. This negative pressure problem that I keep mentioning, and the hydrocarbons, carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, that is all part and parcel of, as I say, these irresponsible ways of using this medicinal plant. And the tongs break the negative pressure initially, because they basically just trap the smoke in a vessel, which then does not require any negative pressure or a vacuum to inhale. You can just breathe it in, assuming the smoke is clear and not this junk, burning from the rubbish inside, whatever he's put in there. But yes, the theory is, of course, the tongs, are there. They break this negative pressure thing, literally snap that in half, and also just get rid of all the hydrocarbons and dirt and toxic carbon dioxide and carbon monoxide, which only just serves to toxify the blood and make it more acidic. and spread cancer. So yeah, the tongs, they're yes, definitely breaking the curse, as it were, this anti-life curse, anti-Christ worship that was started on the back of this murder. Now, the next question is, well, how did they use them? Because there's not a lot given away by this, and there's every possibility that what they would have used on occasion would have been some kind of vessel, as I've just suggested, to trap the smoke. Not necessarily, not all the time, but some of the time, simply to make it more efficient and not just wasted in the air. And the indication of that comes from the Holy Grail. This is just, again, a bit of old artwork taken from the internet in relation to the subject of the Holy Grail. So the Holy Grail chalice sitting up here. Would have liked to have seen it look more like a cup. But yes, you get the general idea. The artwork is all very much the same, from the same period, as this stuff. And also clearly suggests, the Holy Grail would have been used together. It's all part and parcel of the same thing. The same way that this was taken from the altar. The coal was taken from the altar. Well, the Holy Grail also sat on the altar as well. It's all part and parcel of the same thing, yet somehow has been separated today, maybe to put us off the scent and away from the truth of what happened all those years ago. So that then, yes, raises the next question, is how did they use it? And I have a hypothesis and a theory that goes something like this, that after doing a little bit of my own research, and I won't go into too much detail about that, but doing a little bit of my own research, just in a nutshell, heat up some tongs. There's some salad tongs available from Asda or something like that. You can pop a little bit of hash on them if we're in a country where it's legal. And if you pop it in your chalice or vessel, wine bottle with the end taken off, and this is easily doable if you just find a YouTube video to take the end off a wine bottle. And what we discover, curiously, is that when these tongs are put up next to the cold glass and squeezed, what we discover actually is that it produces a stain on the glass, a brown stain. Quite literally, I don't know if I can recreate this just by, I don't know if I can find the colour brown here, or let's just have a quick look here. Quite literally, we will get this just appearance of a brown sort of stain on the grass as you're squeezing, which appears very quickly. And what I discovered is it's very high-grade cannabis oil, and that can be verified and tested quite simply by sending it to a laboratory or by eating it. And I'll be honest, I have eaten some, and on several occasions, and discovered, to my surprise, that yes, it behaves and acts exactly like, the Rick Simpson oil that is extracted, by arguably cleaner methods. So what I was very astonished. Yes, what I was astonished to discover was it's quite possible to make the same kind of oil as he has in his syringe here, simply by using this and creating a stain on the side of the bottle. The interesting thing is also that the oil I discovered, is actually stronger than the hash. I mean, for some reason, it seems to distill it and make it stronger, which then suggests very clearly that if we hold the bottle to our lips and place the tongs to thine lips, as it says in the Bible, inhale the smoke into the lungs and then straight back out through the nose, that will deposit a layer of cannabis oil inside the sinus cavity, which is what this whole business is about. quite literally in the same way that Rick Simpson reversed his sinus cancer, his skin cancer using this oil. I mean, that was a very easy job, wasn't it? He just put the oil on his finger and wiped it on his face. But let's say, that the cancer appeared inside his nose instead of outside. How would he get that oil inside his nose? Well, the answer is, I'll be honest, I tried and it doesn't work. You can't just put this oil up your nose. It doesn't work. I tried several times, and it literally just does not work. It literally, all it did is made my eyes water, and no positive effect whatsoever. So that's when I had to turn around and look to other things, and that's when I realised that, lo and behold, isn't that extraordinary? You can literally, leave a coating of cannabis oil on the inside of this glass bottle, which anyone can come along and test and verify. And I, do strongly suggest that somebody takes a sample, does this, sends it to a lab, and gets a scientist to look at it, because he can come back with a lab report of it and verify that yes, that is a high-grade medical cannabis oil. Which very clearly, could have been used in ancient times to reverse sinus cancer. Just as simple as that. All we have to do is that little experiment and send it to a lab, and take that to a court of law, and job done. It's the then we can prove, very easily that whoever inhaled this and breathed it out again was able to literally paint a layer of cannabis oil inside their sinus cavity, and then reverse any potential tumour or actual tumour growing inside the cavity relatively easily, simply by getting rid of this negative pressure, getting rid of the toxins, purifying the substance. And what we're dealing with here, I believe, is a form of vaporizer. Why this works as well as it does, quite simply, is because this is vaporizing the hashish, and the effect of that means that it condenses, the smoke then condenses onto the glass, the cold glass, just as it does our sinus lining, as a very pure high-grade cannabis oil, simply because it has been vaporized. And it's it's a vaporization process that many people maybe don't realize is happening here. And therefore also explains, how it condenses on the lining of the sinus cavity, like so, providing a constant protection. Obviously that coating of cannabis oil would last for maybe 24 hours or longer before it fell away. So you've got a very durable medicinal coating of cannabis, which, it literally behaves as a extraordinary defense, not just to sinus cancer, but can also, I believe, reverse some sinus cancers in quite a late stage, which would then explain, how this chap, was in such a terrible state, with his face maybe bulging out, he very possibly, was in this kind of, condition, one side of his face bulging out in a terrible state, or like this, or like this, or like me. And all of a sudden, this chap, with his angel wings, puts him back to normal. Bloody amazing, all done with this trick, and this very simple, use of the tong to vaporize hashish. And of course, the problem now is that, or the possibility now is that people get hold of the tongs, they just get hold of these tongs and start misusing them, because I believe they can be certainly used for harm, but certainly a lot less good if we just use them wrong. And I mean quite simply by breathing the smoke. Just breathe the smoke in through the mouth, and instead of out through the nose, you breathe the smoke out through the mouth. And that, I believe, could have some negative consequences, and I do have evidence of negative consequences that can create. So I strongly suggest that yes, there is potential for any old tricks and any old ingenious pieces of equipment to be misused, by modern arrogant opportunists. But nevertheless, the opportunity is there to find out how it was originally used, how people got the best effect of it, how people got the most from the most medicinal plant on earth. And let's see, yes, the list of benefits now, this is the bit I'm getting to, is absolutely gigantic. Break the sucking habit, you know, and all the madness that goes with it, all the manipulation, intimidation, and terrorism. Reduce. I mean, this is arguably also part and parcel of a form of enlightenment. You know, as was just mentioned. You know, in that Bible quote. You know, woe is me, I was undone, but all my iniquity was taken away and my sins were purged. You know, to suggest that, you know, I was no longer, you know, under the thumb of this intimidation. You know, I am now set free. I am now enlightened, living in the light instead of the dark. I'm no longer a sucker, you know, for this ridiculous scam. Boom. So, yeah, reduce smoking by 90%. Fantastic, or 100% if you like. That's what it literally does break the addiction. You know, anything that doesn't work, as we, you know, said earlier on in the video, anything that's partially effective gives way to addiction. And as soon as something's effective, bam, we don't need it anymore. It turned out that the only reason that it was addictive is because it didn't work properly. You know, how bloody infuriating. So, well, once we've cracked it, bam, you know, 90% of your smoking gone, or 100%, because literally you can take it or leave it. Reduce your expenditure by a similar amount. Reduce your toxic intake by, you know, probably more than 90%. Quite simply because, you know, you're smoking 90% less, and the bit you are smoking has now got a lot less contaminants in it and hydrocarbons. So you can pop that up to 99%, you know, less toxic intake. That will save you 90% of your health straight away in a single instant, you know, literally by switching to the tong. And the other benefit, of course, is that you know, we allow all the other benefits of the other treatments, you know, that I mentioned in the first video, a chance to work all of a sudden. You know, removing the ball and chain and all that business that I was talking about in the first video. And if we put a big line under this, if we imagine this as a big mathematical sum for a moment, what we have managed to do is get rid of 90% of crime. Literally 90% of crime gone. Because what I'm suggesting here is, with this artificial inflation and this artificial event, what we have done is artificially inflated terrorism by 90% and crime. Literally a gigantic crime wave following in the wake of all this business, of course. You know, once all the knowledge was gone and nobody knew what to do, and it was just a free-for-all, then yes, you know, with people just suddenly, you know, you've got this scam, you know, suddenly up and running, and people just getting horrifically mutilated. Yeah, it's just a recipe for disaster. Now, as I say, that then raises the question, well, you know, 90% of crime gone, well, that's a lot of jobs gone, because what we're dealing, let's have a quick look at, you know, all the jobs in the payroll here now of this scam. Because if we see this as a pyramid, you know, of the people like on the payroll here, which I think is quite apt. You know, people at the top, obviously, you know, the cancer charities, making most from this ridiculous scam. The people underneath, we've got the doctors and nurses, you know, working for the cancer charities. Then we have the drug companies, of course, you know, and all the people working for them. And then we have the mental health support workers and police at the bottom, you know, who are frantically rushing around, and of course dentists as well, who also benefit, you know, from the removal of all these sensible treatments, you know, and oil pulling, etc. So there's a colossal amount of professions and corporations that, yes, a number of people and businesses, corporations on the payroll of this scam. It's absolutely colossal and cannot be underestimated. And of course, yes, the police and mental health support workers, social workers, etc., or at the bottom of the pyramid, given the task of running around the outskirts of this ridiculous circus to mop up all the fallout, without being told, of course, that the whole thing is the biggest crime on planet Earth. You know, was a crime right from the get-go. 2,000 years ago, which is astonishing, really, that, you know, I mean, police, mental health support workers, I mean, literally, they have been given the task of managing this awful crime. Well, that, it needs to be addressed urgently, I believe, because this is, what started off as just terrorizing individuals, and if smokers has now ended up literally terrorizing the whole entire planet with this insane anti-life worship and anti-Christ terrorism that, as I say, seems to have swallowed up the whole earth at the moment. And the other reason that this scam needs to be closed down, apart from the fact that, yes, we're all just being terrorized, is it has provided the inspiration, I believe, for making a virus. Because, as I touched upon earlier, this getting rid of the cure for sinus cancer, if we crucify the angel here, we crucify Christ, leave the disease literally just to do maximum damage and eat up this man's face, then effectively what we have done is take the dog off the lead. We have a terrifying illness like a pit bull or a Rottweiler, and as I say, if you have a solution for it, like some clever chap like Jesus who can come along, and pop this dog on a lead and stop it from doing, this awful damage that we see here, then that's all well and good. But as soon as, of course, you've crucified Christ, what you've effectively done is taken the dog off the lead and created a man-made bioweapon that is now unleashed and free to create this awful facial distortions, which can get a lot worse than this, I hasten to add. And this is the original bioweapon, and gave the people managing this scam all the inspiration, I believe, for making a virus. And it's quite understandable, really, after 2,000 years of this bullshit, that they should start exploiting and experimenting other options, such as making a virus as like COVID-19. And I suggest it's therefore no coincidence at all that this has just suddenly popped out as this scam has all of a sudden got rumbled. Now, yes, all the inspiration is there. As I've just said, 2,000 years practice terrorizing people with smoking-related illnesses was the perfect inspiration. Now the whole world is in the grip of this tyranny, isolated, terrorized, too scared to go outside without a face mask. I mean, literally, this is the way the world is going, literally, as I am narrating this video, again from an artificially created event. This... make a virus, keep the cure for themselves, and you can be sure that they have the cure. That they're taking colloidal silver or something similar, and they then use the virus to, terrorize the world and make as much money as they like, and look forward to world domination. So yes, artificially created from start to finish. Quite simply, this COVID-19, yes, artificial event that very clearly, could be connected to this event, and turning sinus cancer into a man-made bioweapon. Clearly indicating, yes, that the root of this problem goes back 2,000 years. We have to, yes, pull this plant out by the root, quite literally. I think if we don't tackle this deeper part of the problem, then it will continue to grow branches. If we just pull off the branches in the form of just tackling this, this virus, and we don't keep an eye on this, then yes, it could create much more problems later on. And as I say, the suggestion here is very clear, that we just get rid of the whole goddamn thing, from start to finish. Just label it an artificially created event, and make sure that nothing of this nature happens again in future. Now, interesting things here, just before I finish, is that, sad observations are that, obviously a lot of people again set to the task of running this scam. A lot of the businesses, charities, corporations, etc., and all the employees put to the task of running this scam and exploiting the people, who, pay for the charities, etc., and the privilege of it, also fall a victim to it themselves, which is, something that they may not even realise. But that raises the question, well, how do we start in closing down this scam? Where do we start? I think a good place to start would be my suggestion is to stop locking up these people who have been miseducated, led astray, literally just kept in the dark with this, just ridiculous nonsense. And what I'm suggesting is, yes, society has to take a proportion of the blame here. Instead of just pointing the finger at the victim, let's start taking some responsibility for the education we provide them, and stop locking up victims of this medical terrorism, sinus cancer patients, etc., etc. And of course, yes, if this guy develops sinus cancer, you can rest assured he will become, like I have, the victim of some very fierce legal manipulation. Now, yes, this, very clearly, this sinus cancer terrorizes the patient enough. If you're having your face blown into distorted shapes, I can assure you that's terrorism enough without adding to it, without arresting him and throwing him in jail. This is practically what happened to me. So, start going after the organisers of the scam is what I am saying. Let's take our attention away from from the peasants and the slaves, and start focusing our attention on the people running this scam. The corporations, the cancer charities, who are aware of what's going on. The cancer charities know that, there must be people at the top who are aware that they are beating people to death on a routine basis in order to keep it running. There must be. We know that. And we know there are people at the top who know that they are, beating people to death on a regular basis who dare to, expose cures and treatments. And, we can't tolerate this anymore. We're not living in a, draconian, backward society. I hope, or, wish to create something like that for our future. So, yes, what I suggest is that we go after the people who maintain this awful scam, because they are seeking to expand upon it. They are also seeking to expand the serial murder, to maintain, the expansion of the scam. And we start going out after the likes of Dr. Fauci and Bill Gates, and the real big money criminals, mafiosi, drug cartel gangsters, big pharma employees, or managers rather, managing directors who are clearly responsible, for the current maintenance of this scam. And I think, yes, as I say, I think this should be a call to arms. If any of you out there have any similar stories, any advice you would like to offer me, if you would like to forward me any evidence, or of any other patients, or you can suggest ways that the global population can get together and provide some kind of resistance to this dreadful movement, because I think, yes, the time is ripe, the time is now. We have this Black Lives Matter protest, going on outside the window as I'm narrating this. There isn't a strong objection to slavery happening, within our communities all over the world. And I think now is the time to say, no, we don't want this slavery anymore. We don't want this terrorism. The people of the world have agreed, have come to the decision that we're not going to tolerate this anymore. And clearly, if we can get to that place and achieve that goal, then I think the scam will collapse in the same moment. And I look forward to that event, and a happier, more harmonious future than the last 2,000 years. And with that in mind, perhaps we can also do something constructive about this virus, and yes, arresting these damn people that have made it, because I have a feeling they also have plans to make another virus similar to it.